Today's episode is sponsored by Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right below this video. I want to start today with something a little different and very interesting and important in understanding a lot of the structures that have gotten the politics of the United States to where they are today. We're going to look at a new poll from the New York Times, with Siena College. And it's not about who's winning, Biden or Trump. It's really about one of the fundamental inequalities that we have in the United States. It's not income inequality, which we'll talk about later today with our guest. It is a poll that confirms something I've been talking about for many years, which is that on the issues, the United States electorate, meaning people, you, me, us, we are well to the left compared to, number one, what many people might assume is the left-right balance of the country. But maybe more importantly, the country is to the left of where our elected representatives are. Our elected representatives are far more conservative than the makeup of the United States. We have a country where if you go to individual people and you ask them about policy, very important, you ask about policy issues, policy questions, you come away with the impression that the country is quite left, certainly more left than many people are willing to admit. But then you look at governors and you look at state legislatures and you look at the makeup of the Senate and the makeup of corporate media, and it sort of seems like a center-right country. But as I've told you before, we have 3 to 4 different systems in this country that keep our representation well to the right of the actual electorate. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go through it in pieces. This is one of those types of stories which, it's not a clickbait story. It's not going to get 500,000 views on YouTube. But if you don't understand this, you miss a lot of why the country is the way it is. So it's really important to do. First and foremost, the New York Times poll asked likely voters about their positions on a variety of issues. And when you look at the numbers, there's nothing center right about this country. For example, 72% of the country wants a second $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus package. 72%. Only 21% oppose a second coronavirus stimulus. In a country this polarized and seemingly divided, 72% agreement on anything is stunning. 72% want the $2 trillion second stimulus. How about this? 67% of the country believes there should be a public health insurance option. Now, I know it's not single payer, it's not Medicare for all. But remember, when the debate started in 2010, 2009 about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, President Obama started the negotiation at, I'd like a public option. The Republican Party went crazy, pretending it was some kind of socialist government takeover of healthcare. And yet, 67% of this country agrees we should have it. When you hear Trump talk about we're going to get rid of Obamacare at rallies and his crowd cheers and Fox News talks about it in less than glowing terms, you might get the impression that there's a lot of debate among the public, but 67% of the country agrees this is something we should have. Something this controversial with hundreds of millions of dollars spent in opposition. And 2/3 of the country flat out says we should have this option. There should be such a government option. Now it gets more interesting. Joe Biden's $2 trillion climate plan, which Donald Trump and Republicans pretend is crazy. They say it'll end the auto industry. They say it'll end fossil fuel industry. They say it's outrageous. It's socialist. 66% of the country supports Joe Biden's $2 trillion climate plan, which includes getting back into the Paris Climate Accords, some elements using the Green New Deal as a framework, phasing out fossil fuel vehicles, on and on and on. 2/3 of the country wants it. Even things that have become almost rallying cries of the right, like their opposition to a national mask mandate, which, by the way, would really be a president saying, hey, governors, please do mask mandates in your states. And it would ultimately be up to governors whether to do it or not. 59% of the country wants a national mask mandate. Here's another interesting one. Fracking. Donald Trump and Republicans have made a huge deal out of saying Joe Biden will ban fracking. It's not actually what Biden would do. Biden has a plan to phase it out over time. But as if continuing to frack is so important, Trump has been hammering Biden on that. Only 44% of the country wants fracking to exist. An almost equal amount, 42%, doesn't, and 14% isn't sure. A big portion of that, I believe, if they learn more about it, would be against fracking. So this is not a right-wing country. When you look at this, I mean, even if you just say, let's only look at policies with 60% approval or higher, 60% or higher support, that would mean we get a $2 trillion second coronavirus stimulus, public health insurance, and Biden's $2 trillion climate plan. That's just if we set the line at 60% and we say only do things where 60% of the country agrees. That's three major policies that would be a major leftward switch. So we then must ask the question, why does the Senate have 53 Republicans? Why do we have 26 Republican governors? Why is it so hard to remove a lunatic Republican president? And as I've said before, we have systems that favor the American right. Example number one. Electoral college. The electoral college system has handed Republican wins to Republican candidates who lost the popular vote. Much like on the issues, the will of the people was to elect a Democrat. The electoral college handed it to a Republican. That's a systemic help to the right. Example number two, gerrymandering, which is the strategic drawing of congressional districts, has allowed way more Republican members of the House than you would have with fairly drawn districts. The Democratic Party would have a bigger majority right now were it not for gerrymandering. There are previous Republican majorities which may have not been Republican majorities were it not for gerrymandering. Systemic help to the American right. Example number three, the Senate as an institution. When you give each state 2 senators, and the states vary widely in population, low population states get disproportionately more power. California has 60, 70 times the population of Wyoming. California has 2 senators. Wyoming has 2 senators. Wyoming is a red state. Wyoming senators have insanely more power relative to their populations than California, because conservatives prefer, on average, to live more rurally, whereas Democrats, left-wingers, progressives prefer to live more in urban or suburban settings. At a systemic level, that gives more power to fewer right-leaning people. So the key takeaways here are not to get tricked by really bad talking points for many on the right, including talking points like this is a center-right country. It's not. When you fairly poll people on issues, you see that this is a center-left to left country. And number two, we have systemic elements of how our system is organized that have our representation be far to the right of what the actual country believes on a number of different issues. Something to keep in mind as we go forward over the next 2 weeks towards this upcoming election. Speaking of going forward to the election, we actually have some, what I think is overall very good news, and news that is extremely triggering for the president of the United States, Donald Trump. The second and final presidential debate is this Thursday, and candidate microphones will be muted during the initial answer periods when the other candidate is speaking. This is not going to apply during the open discussion period. You're still going to have back and forth during the open discussion. But as you might remember, during the first presidential debate, Donald Trump just would not stop talking, interrupting Joe Biden. It wasn't clear whether Trump was sort of manically outbursting or whether it was a strategy to try to throw Biden off or a combination of the two. But it made the debate worthless in terms of hearing policy ideas, although it does seem to have hurt Donald Trump in polling because of his childish, petulant behavior. So when we then, after that first debate, had the Commission on Presidential Debates announce that what should have been the second debate would happen via video conference because Trump had coronavirus. And Trump said, I'm not going to do it remote. They can silence you whenever they want if you do that. And he backed out of the debate altogether. So we now have one debate to go, the last debate scheduled for Thursday night. And indeed, during the initial 2-minute answer periods, the microphone of the candidate not speaking will be muted. The Commission on Presidential Debates said in a statement that, quote, "We realize after discussions with both campaigns that neither campaign may be totally satisfied with the measures announced today. One may think they go too far, and one may think they do not go far enough. We are comfortable that these actions strike the right balance and that they are in the interest of the American people for whom these debates are held." Now, there were some people who soon after the first debate and people started calling for the muting of microphones said, if you mute the mics, it's not really a debate. If you mute mics, it's sequential talking points. It eliminates debate. It eliminates the possibility of a back and forth. This is a balanced approach in the sense that of each 15-minute block, 4 minutes will be reserved exclusively for one candidate or the other. After the 4-minute period, 2 minutes for each candidate, then the microphones are open. It's open discussion. So I think it will undeniably make the debate more watchable. There are people wondering whether it's really even better for Biden. One would imagine that letting Biden kind of lay out his ideas uninterrupted will help him. And I think it would. The counter is, does it help him more than the damage Trump does by just talking over Biden during those initial couple of minutes? Biden could have helped himself by speaking uninterrupted, but Trump really cratered in the polls after that first debate. In the end, again, there will be time for both. 4 of each 15 minutes will be including mic muting. So it's a relatively small adjustment. Bottom line, these are the updated rules, and Donald Trump is already not pleased. He said yesterday to reporters after being told about this change, "I'll participate. I just think it's very unfair." Trump also spent time at a rally in Prescott, Arizona yesterday, attacking the moderator of this week's debate, who is Kristen Welker. Take a listen to that.
Another real great one. Another great one. Kristen Welker. She's a radical Democrat. Look at them. They're getting angry. She's a radical Democrat. She deleted her entire account. Everything is deleted. But I've known her. She's been screaming questions at me for a long time. And she's no good.
So Trump attacking the moderator there. And then reportedly, the president is also not happy that as he sees it, the topics were changed. Trump kept saying the debate Thursday night was on foreign policy. And now, for example, coronavirus is a topic. I always thought that foreign policy was not the subject of Thursday night's debate, but Trump is angry, claiming they changed the topics on him. So bottom line, I think there's a chance Trump does back out. I would put it probably at about 20%. I hope he doesn't. I hope this debate does happen. But it's very funny how for months Donald Trump had been saying, oh, Biden's going to find a way out. Biden's brain's not working. He can't handle debating me. And then it's Trump who bailed on debate number 2. And it's Trump who's not pleased with the guidelines for debate number 3. Now, a serious question, and a lot of people are asking about this. Is Trump going to just try to interrupt anyway, even if he's off mic? My guess is if Trump tried to do it, yeah, it would look very bad. But you would be able to probably hear Donald Trump's voice if he tries to interrupt Joe Biden, picked up both by Joe Biden's microphone, maybe as much as by the moderator's microphone. So I think it's something Trump could do. I think if he does it, it would look very, very bad. And reports are that Trump's advisors and people prepping him for the debate have been advising him not to interrupt and to sort of try to be more likable. Even if Trump likes the idea of being more liked, as I'm sure his ego would like, Donald Trump has a very hard time controlling himself. And Donald Trump has a very hard time listening to people who give him advice because he thinks he knows better than everybody. So my prediction is that in Nashville, 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night, which is when the debate starts, my prediction is that Trump's behavior will be very similar to what we saw in debate number 1. At the beginning, he might be more under control. I think he will eventually lose it. I hope you will watch the debate with me. I will be streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook starting maybe 30, 45 minutes before the debate. Join me then, and we will take it all in together. If you're not going to watch the debate, I'm curious about why. Let me know on Twitter, where you can find me at @DPakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist, and what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. And you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Remember to grab yourself a membership on my website, joinpakman.com. The primary funding source of this program is just people, good people like you, I'm sure, who go to joinpakman.com and sign up for a membership. Hey, this is very, very interesting. Now that the entire Hunter Biden story from the New York Post has been very much called into question, Mediaite is reporting that Fox News was actually approached with the story before the New York Post, or at least concurrently, and could have made a decision to run it as soon as or even earlier than the New York Post. And of course, it was Donald Trump's henchman, Rudy Giuliani, who approached them with the Hunter Biden story. The story, it turns out, was too crazy and too incredible and too poorly sourced for Fox News to go with it. Fox News reportedly looked at the story, realized that they couldn't vet the sourcing, they couldn't vet the veracity of the emails, and they passed on it, and on it went to the New York Post. And there's a few different interesting layers here to talk about. Now, first of all, just because Fox News didn't publish it doesn't mean they haven't promoted it. And in fact, Fox News has been going crazy with the story. But the idea was Fox News, because the New York Post was the original source on the story, can talk about it not as their reporting, but just as here is what the New York Post story says. And it kind of puts a layer between them and the story while still allowing them to talk about it. So understand how far this has gone so far from the original story. Originally, the New York Post reports it. Trumpists say it's a bombshell, but it seems a little bit fishy. Contains things that were previously debunked, like it again raises the idea that Joe Biden was involved in the firing of a prosecutor in Ukraine because Hunter Biden asked him to do it in his role as a board member of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. That was debunked. And a bunch of other elements were debunked. And it sort of looked like, wow, if these emails are real, it seems like Joe Biden loves his son. That was one of the big takeaways. We then learned that the reporter who wrote the story, primarily wrote the story, didn't even want his name on it because it was so shaky. And that other New York Post staffers says, take my name off of the story. I don't even want my byline on there. I don't even think we should be publishing this story at all. That's kind of weird. Then we hear that Rudy Giuliani says, well, yeah, it is a 50-50 shot that he worked on the story with a Russian spy. And then now we learn that Fox News, of all places, decided it was below them to publish the story. And even some people on air at Fox News Channel have said the story's a little weird. Check out, for example, what Chris Wallace said about it and about Rudy Giuliani as well.
You know, I can understand the concern about this story. It is completely unverified, and frankly, Rudy Giuliani is not the most reliable source anymore. I hate to say that, but it's just true. There's a story in the Washington Post and the New York Times today saying that the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, had to tell the president in December of last year that the intelligence agencies thought that Giuliani was being worked by Russian agents and was being used to spread Russian disinformation.
That is Fox News anchor Chris Wallace saying this. But again, just as a reminder, Fox News isn't off the hook here. Fox News has been talking about the story constantly. Their top primetime opinion people have had no qualms whatsoever about spreading the story as if it's true, despite it being less credible with every single passing day. So great, Fox didn't publish it, but they reported on it. They just needed or wanted a degree of separation and the plausible deniability that comes with saying, as reported by the New York Post. They didn't want to break the story, but since the New York Post did, they can say something along the lines of, well, we don't, this is what is being reported. And as a final reminder, News Corporation owns both Fox News and the New York Post. Now, I'm not alleging that, for example, if one was more conspiratorial, they might say they may have coordinated. Fox News and the New York Post, both under News Corporation, might have made the decision, listen, this is better if the New York Post reports it and then Fox News can run with it rather than Fox News reporting it. It'll be better received. Blah, 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 blah. Maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't happen. But the point is, Fox News has been signal boosting it. They've had no hesitation whatsoever to do it. And when there's this much vertical integration, media consolidation, anything could be going on. And in the end, News Corporation published it and News Corporation continues to signal boost it on two of their different platforms. Every single day, it becomes less credible. Yesterday, I brought you very interesting clips from an interview that Dr. Anthony Fauci gave to 60 Minutes on Sunday night. Now, Donald Trump didn't like that interview and has now called Dr. Fauci a disaster, seems to group him in with idiots on coronavirus and openly mulled the idea of firing Dr. Fauci during a call yesterday. Now, remember that Dr. Fauci said during his 60 Minutes interview that he's now getting threats, needs full-time security. The direction of the pandemic is unclear. He's not surprised Trump got coronavirus. Trump is furious. This was all from a campaign call that took place yesterday, Monday. There were reporters on the call. No one is disputing what Trump said. Here are the reports. Jeff Mason from Reuters tweeted that Trump is disparaging Dr. Fauci on the call, says people are tired of hearing from Fauci and all these idiots, and says that Fauci has, quote, been here for 500 years. Trump also mused about firing Fauci if it weren't for the negative press he would anticipate if he were to do it. And again said Fauci is a disaster. Will Staken from ABC tweeted about this same call that Trump said, quote, people are tired of COVID. People are saying whatever. Trump is now discussing firing Dr. Fauci on a campaign all-staff call, saying it's a bigger bomb if you fire him. Caitlin Collins from CNN tweeting, quote, on call with campaign staff, President Trump says people are tired of hearing about coronavirus. People are just saying whatever, just leave us alone. They're tired of it. People are tired of hearing Fauci and all these idiots. Fauci is a nice guy. He's been here for 500 years. And then subsequently, as reported by Caitlin Collins, Trump said, quote, Fauci is a disaster. If I listened to him, we'd have 500,000 deaths, which, by the way, we might eventually before it's all said and done, before later saying it would be 700,000 or 800,000. If there's a reporter on, you can have it just the way I said it. I couldn't care less. Caitlin Collins adding that CNN was given access to this call by a source. So every reporter who was listening to the call on the same page about what was said. I think that Donald Trump really is thinking of firing Dr. Fauci. He may be kind of floating it to see what the response is from campaign staff. I think the response, if Trump fires Fauci, I do think it would be the nail in the coffin of Trump's campaign. I know we're looking at key states and comparing 2020 polling to 2016, and it could go this way, it could go that way. I think at this point, if Trump fires Fauci at this late stage, it's game over for Donald Trump. Fortunately, well, let me put it a different way. Hopefully, Dr. Fauci will soon be working for a different president. His role in fighting coronavirus will be rehabilitated. But I don't know how much longer Fauci is going to be working for Trump at this rate. I think if Trump gets reelected, there's a very good chance Fauci gets fired. And it's interesting because when Trump says people are tired of the pandemic, we are tired of the administration continuing to mess up the pandemic. That's what I'm tired of. I'm tired that there was never a coherent response, that there's this constant blundering of the reaction to the virus. That's what I'm tired of. And if Trump and his useless administration would have listened to Fauci from the get-go, the economic damage would have been mitigated. and things would be far better than they are now. We would have fewer cases. We would have fewer deaths. I am sick of coronavirus. Trump is right. But I'm even more sick of Donald Trump and his followers and their mishandling. I'm tired of staying home so that I don't contract or spread the virus. But I'm more tired of Trump's cult not doing what they should have done to get this under control. But for the president to be tired of it, too, won't help it go away. And that's why he has to be removed. Now, I mentioned there that Jeff Mason reported on some of the things Trump said about Dr. Fauci during that campaign call. Later in the day, Donald Trump actually called Jeff Mason a criminal for asking him a question. The authoritarianism that we are seeing from Donald Trump has not been funny for a long time, but now it's taking on a more vicious and disturbing tone. Donald Trump yesterday, on his way out to his various rallies, I believe they were multiple rallies in Arizona yesterday, called a reporter a criminal for asking him a question. This is how bad it has gotten. Take a look.
Strategy seems to be to call Biden a criminal. Why is that?
He is a criminal. He's a criminal. He got caught. Read his laptop. And you know who's a criminal? You're a criminal for not reporting it. You are a criminal for not reporting it. Let me tell you something. Joe Biden is a criminal, and he's been a criminal for a long time. And you're a criminal in the media for not reporting it. Good luck, everybody. Have a good time.
So Donald Trump said he would lock up Hillary Clinton during the last campaign. He wants to expand libel laws to sue media outlets more easily. He said Barack Obama and Joe Biden committed the greatest political crime in history. He has kicked reporters out of the press briefing room. He said a few days ago that if he's reelected, he will lock up the Bidens. And now a reporter who asks, I guess Jeff Mason from Reuters asked the wrong question, according to Trump, isn't asking the question Trump wants asked. He now is a criminal. This is not funny. This is not a joke. This is the greatest attack on a free press and on due process that I remember from any president. Now, if you have an example of a president who has been more hostile to the press and more authoritarian in terms of saying that his enemies should be locked up, let me know and I will examine that. So then take a look at this. Fox News goes back to discussion about what you just saw. Did they express dismay at Donald Trump calling a fellow journalist a criminal? No. Did they express outrage at the authoritarian insanity that has taken hold? No. Fox News, in reaction to that clip, criticized reporters for, as they say, trolling Trump. Here is Karl Rove coming in to say the problem is the press.
He also just said that Joe Biden is a criminal, and he has been for a long time, and that the reporters are a criminal for not reporting that. He did not seem like he was in a great mood, I have to say.
Well, you wonder why he keeps doing this with the press, because they know how to get under his skin and they troll him. They don't talk about the issues that he wants to talk about. They talk about the issues they want to talk about. And so maybe he's better off, giving them a message from the podium and not making himself so readily available. It's amazing how available he is, particularly when compared to his opponent.
Wow. The president just attacked a reporter for asking a completely reasonable question as a criminal. Surely freedom-loving, First Amendment defending Fox News is going to call it out, right? No. The problem is the press. And the problem is that Biden is in his basement. Really dangerous what's going on here. We really can't afford another 4 years of this. And I will say, it is nice to see Trump unraveling so publicly if it helps remove him and if it horrifies voters into either staying home instead of voting for Trump or going out and voting for Biden. That's the one possible upside. But if all of this is end capped with, bookended maybe is a better phrase, with Donald Trump getting reelected, we have a very ugly 4 years, 4 years ahead of us. And, jail everyone is Trump's new thing. And he does seem to recognize, at least looking at his rhetoric in recent rallies, that Biden may well beat him, starting to talk about, North Carolina, if you don't vote for me, I'll never come back. I might leave the country if Joe Biden wins. But threats to jail your political opponents, this is something if you're a student of history and of 20th century geopolitics, you would know that this happens. There are threats to jail political opponents, and sometimes it even happens. But for this to become so common and to the point where Trump supporters cheer it in the United States, It's very, very ugly. Desperation may be setting in some sense, but if we don't get a different outcome than we got in 2016, we're in real trouble here. We're going to have more on this on the show's Instagram page. Make sure you are following David Pakman Show on Instagram, and follow me on Instagram at david.pakman for video of me voting. Very powerful voting video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Great to welcome back to the program today Don Jeffries, who's incorporated a life of experience in different areas into many different books, including Survival of the Richest, which we previously discussed, and most recently Bulliocracy, which is so relevant in so many ways right now. It's great to have you back on the program.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be back, David.
So I know that let's not dance around the fact that this conversation is very relevant to Donald Trump, but we don't have to talk about Trump, at least not initially. What is your understanding of why certain kids end up becoming bullies?
Well, I think that there is and I cite in the book, there was a study out of England that discovered that basically the traits we see in every bully are psychopathic type traits. Many of them are. And unfortunately, our society is ruled largely by psychopaths. And if you look at the occupations where psychopathic personalities are predominant, they're all the highest paid professions: doctors, lawyers, CEOs, athletes, entertainers, clergymen, policemen. Things like that, which policemen really aren't the most successful, but they have power in terms of. So this is when we look at success, a successful person is indistinguishable often from a bully. They trample on people on the way up. That's how they get their way. And as long as they win, you look in the sports world, certainly, all the best coaches, virtually every one of the most successful coaches, have bullying characteristics. And as long as they win, that's fine. If they don't win, well, there's a problem, and they bring next coach on. But I think our society pays lip service to the fact that we like kindness or whatever. But we don't. I mean, clearly, it's kindness and empathy are looked at as weak characteristics, where aggressiveness and being able to confront somebody's power, especially in any kind of power, these are the qualities that we admire. And everything about our culture and certainly the business world says that.
Now, there must be, I'm guessing, a sort of circumstantial aspect to this as well. I mean, in other words, there must be something about the circumstances in which all those who might find themselves predisposed to bullying would find themselves in. Some, based on the actual reality they're living, may become bullies and some may not, right?
Sure. Well, I think the reason why my book is different is, as the subtitle says, I believe it's a social hierarchy that enables bullies. And that's why I criticize the school systems, especially because this is where bullying is born. And I don't believe they do anything really to weed out the bullies, because they're not talking about how it's just recent research that has shown us in the past. We kind of had that stereotype. Well, the kid is a bully. Maybe his father's beating him and he's lashing out at the world, or there's alcoholism there. Maybe it's a single mother not watching him, living in a trailer park in poverty or something. That's not the case. Overwhelmingly, the bullies are the popular crowd, and especially in the sports world. And we see the jocks bullying the nerdy types or whatever, the goth crowd. And that's the dynamic you see in every school system. And because of the importance that is placed on sports, it's ironic that we send our kids to school, and it should be theoretically that the kids who are most successful in school are those who get the best grades, because that's why you're going there, right? That's not the case. Very seldom is the class valedictorian a popular kid, unless they also happen to be an athlete, which they could be. Especially females. A lot of the mean girl types do very well, and you have, their National Honor Society and things like that. But it's because they don't want to approach the topic of popularity. Because if you have a concept of popularity where everybody knows certain kids are popular, you have to have a contrasting unpopular. There's no such thing as beauty if you don't have ugliness to contrast it with. So I think that is the problem, that those trench coat mafia types have to exist in order for the popular crowd to be basically celebrities in their school. And I document in the book over and over again, as you know, that these school systems, from the teacher to the principals, to the superintendent, to the local media, to law enforcement most of the time, they always poo-poo the claims. They sweep them under the table. Parents will go over and over again to the school systems, name the people who are bullying their child, sometimes physically. Nothing is done about it. And a lot of times I talked to too many parents whose kids killed themselves. They were bully-sided from it. And even afterwards, a lot of the anti-bullying groups even will say, no, it's more complex than that. Even when they, in their suicide notes, they'll say, I did this because of bullying, or they'll sometimes even name the actual bullies. They still try to sweep that under the rug. And I think that's the problem, is they're not addressing it correctly. And instead they have these kind of nonsensical zero tolerance and no bully. And those schools, as I point out, actually have more bullying in them than the places that don't advertise that. So I think it's a complex issue, but I don't think anybody until my book was looking at the right culprit here, which I think is the social hierarchy, which creates and enables bullies.
To talk a little bit about the social hierarchy, I remember back when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school, where the popular kids and the bullies were of varied economic backgrounds. In other words, right. You had they were like the rich kids and poor kids and whatever. You had really kind of a mix. More recently, I've talked to a lot of different people who work in school systems in different parts of the country, particularly in suburban settings. Now, this may be different in urban settings or rural, but what a lot of them report is that they see that not necessarily the bullies, but the popular kids tend to be the richest kids. How does that play? Is that a broader phenomenon, and how does that play into the bullying?
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of crossover between this book and my book, Survival of the Richest, which you talked about before, because it's certainly wealth has its perks everywhere. And if you're a kid who comes from wealth, you're going to dress better. You're going to have the latest accoutrements. You're going to have, the latest iPad or whatever, your latest cell phone, those kinds of things. You're going to have access to things that are going to make you seem better. And kids are going to want to hang around with you because maybe you live in a nicer house. Maybe you have a big swimming pool in your backyard. So, of course, maybe your parents will pay for their friends to go to some concert or whatever. I mean, all these things are possible there. Whereas if a kid is not wealthy, they might not have a cell phone, or might they have a crappy old cell phone or something. And it's like anything else. That's why looks are so important. And I talk a lot about that there, is that the way you can trump economics is to be really good looking. A girl from the other side of the tracks that just is really gorgeous, I don't think too many people are going to be making fun of her economic circumstances. And, this is something I think that, again, we don't look at, but I think there's a lot of crossover there. And I think that I've been reminded many times when I wrote this book, it's not to say that every popular kid, I mean, I was interviewed once by a girl saying, I was a homecoming queen. I said, I'm not saying everybody that is popular is a bully, but I think the vast majority of those bullies happen to be popular, and especially the cases that aren't addressed by the teachers and the principals and the superintendents. They're not addressed logically. I think it's because of that popularity. I'll give you a perfect example that I cite in the book. There was a viral video a couple years ago where the guy went to a middle-aged man went to his local school board meeting, and he wanted to talk about the bullying that was going on in the local high school. He said, I went there 25 years ago, or whatever it was. And he said, it was there then. And he pointed the finger at the school superintendent. And he said, you were the one who led the bullying against me. You were the one who stuffed my head in the urinal and things like, and it's shocking to see the stupid grin this superintendent gets on his face. I mean, instantly you could see he got like a memory jolt and he was exposed. But he just kind of, well, I'll tell you, and he just kind of laughed. but you could see it coming back. Now, who knows how many other school superintendents were bullies? So it certainly in that school district, will any claims of bullying be taken seriously if the guy in charge was a vicious bully? And I think we don't know how many people are like that. And I have a whole section in the book where I talk about all the high-profile people in our society, is from actors to actors in the entertainment world, CEOs, just people that have politicians. And it's astonishing how many of them the overwhelming majority were popular in school. And so if you look at it, like I think the group Bowling for Soup had a song called High School Never Ends. And I think that's kind of the way it is, where that crowd, not all of them, I mean, there are Bill Gates people out there, of course, they're outliers, but if you look at, I mean, people don't know Woody Allen, for instance, the quintessential nerd was actually a great high school baseball and basketball player. So, if you can get some, Rosie O'Donnell was her homecoming queen. So it's not, a lot of times we'll look at it and people don't realize. And so I think they're already, the social hierarchy was very good to them. And certainly the Fortune 500 the overwhelming majority of these people went to the high profile fraternities, which I talk about in the book. That's where out of high school, you go to college, and it's the fraternities and sororities, the Greek life. That's where you see the next step in building those cliques. And of course, that turns into business cliques, because those people go into high-profile jobs and they're fraternity brothers. And again, it's this kind of corruption that I write about everywhere else. We see these kind of cliques form, and people that weren't in those fraternities don't have a chance to get in there. And so I think it's a very complex issue, but the fact that it's not addressed at the school level, I think, is the most important thing. And all we're asking is that, somebody, especially when you're bragging about it and saying you have zero tolerance, if somebody comes to you, it's pretty clear cut. If somebody comes to you, and I describe in the book, there was a little girl that came up from kindergarten that looked like she'd been 15 rounds in the ring with Mike Tyson. And her mother naturally wanted an explanation. Well, the school said she fell. And the girl said, no, this other girl's been picking on me, and she pushed me off the slide. So, if that's happening in kindergarten and somebody's covering up, I don't even know what that explanation is, but certainly they need to look at the teachers who are the first line of defense here. There's the first people that could theoretically stop it.
Yeah.
And the principals who aren't backing them up, and then the superintendents. And I describe many, many cases over and over again. The readers' heads will swim looking at them, but it's always the same story. We went over and over and over again. They did nothing about it. In worst case scenarios, my child kills himself. Afterwards, they continue to demonize. They infer maybe it was us, the family, that maybe you were at fault, and they still don't claim any responsibility. So it's a huge issue.
And in the limited time we have left, Don, when we look at some of the behavior we've seen from Donald Trump, which includes certainly bullying people on social media and directing ire at specific individuals, the irony of Melania's anti-bullying campaign, while the behavior of her husband is completely antithetical to that. We've since learned about some elements of Donald Trump's upbringing, including that his dad, at minimum, was verbally abusive. That, there was this attitude of never apologize for anything, never admit that you're wrong, which we've seen Donald Trump take up. What do you make of all of that? Because as you said, it's not always as simple as, the bully is a bully because they're getting bullied at home. But what do you make of the Trump story?
Well, that could have played into part there. And it could just be, again, he comes from great wealth. As my friend Gerald Celente likes to say, he was born in third base and thinks he hit a home run. And there's so many of these guys do that. So somebody like Trump led a life of privilege his entire life. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. So it's hard to be humble under those circumstances. Now, in his case, he appears to have had a very weird family dynamic. His mother was, I think, probably just as strange as his father. So I don't know. I think somebody said once that nobody had ever told him that they loved him in his life. And certainly, if you look at the way he kind of trades in supermodel wives every 20 years, I don't think he's ever really looked for love. He's looking for a new model. So I think he's kind of the quintessential superficial guy, the ultimate materialist guy. And his personality, unfortunately, is perfect for our burgeoning idiocracy that we have now. I mean, he's basically, in many ways, he's like President Camacho, if you've seen the movie Idiocracy. I mean, he's got the WWE personality. And what has happened is he has lowered the level of discourse and everybody has joined him. It's a huge food fight. So you have the other side tries to bully him, and they're always down in the gutter. They're calling each other names, and that's what it's turned into. And it's a shame, but it's not surprising because people knowing of Trump's personality has been out there for a long time.
Yeah.
You listen to some of the interviews with Howard Stern and stuff. He's really, what was different is the populist rhetoric that a lot of us were attracted to during his campaign. I mean, came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But now, but his personality is, but it's always been packaged in that personality. And I think because he is really attacked constantly. And if he had any kind of a sympathetic personality, I think a lot of people would feel sorry for him because he is attacked, but he just doesn't have any of that. And he lashes. And it's unfortunate that's, I wrote a whole little section in Bulliocracy about the emergence of Trump, and it's fitting. And you're certainly, like you said, his wife has an anti-bullying message, but we see that a lot of the football players, where they'll put people like Russell Wilson of the Seahawks, who admits what a big bully he was in school. He says, "Yeah, I used to rub kids' nose in the dirt and stuff," and he runs an anti-bullying organization. Now, maybe he's reformed, and a lot of these football players are in charge or sponsor these organizations. And my contention is that football, especially, breeds this bullying because it's manliness and toughness. And if you're going against you're just natural. If you're coming up against a theater crowd, which may have gays in it or whatever, just very not macho guys or whatever, it's going to be natural for those football players to come up and bump against them and just do what they do. And but it's because the schools place so much more emphasis on sports than they do in academics or anything else. And we see in society the role that sports plays in our lives. I mean, sports plays a tremendous amount. Look at all the money that goes into it. What the corporate welfare that I talked about in Survival of the Richest, the most egregious example of that are all the stadiums that taxpayers build, NFL stadiums especially, and MLB stadiums that are paid for completely. And it's because that fan base says, "No, please don't move our team.
Right.
We'll pay for it." And so I think it's but again, people don't want to equate sports with bullying because, I'm a huge sports fan. I played sports, I coach sports, I love sports, but I recognize how it breeds this kind of behavior, and especially when it's not held into account.
Yeah, and to be clear, there are gay football players as well. Not that you were suggesting that there were not, of course.
Right.
The latest book is Bulliocracy. We've been speaking with Donald Jeffries. Don, always great speaking to you. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have today one of those totally wacky Trump stories that came out yesterday where it would be hilarious if Trump wasn't actually in charge of the nuclear codes. And it is now being widely reported that Donald Trump got bored earlier in his presidency during a classified intelligence briefing. So he interrupted the meeting to bring in a waiter to order a milkshake, despite the waiter not being cleared to be in the room or hear any of what was being discussed. Trump just said, "Bring him over. I want a milkshake." Imagine being this desperate for a milkshake or this bored during high-level classified briefings that you just must get a milkshake right away. The scene is 2017 at Trump's New Jersey Golf Club. There is Trump's there having a meeting with the CIA Special Activities Center. That's a unit that is responsible for operations including clandestine and covert operations where the U.S. government doesn't want to be overtly associated. Like, this is really, really high level stuff, very classified, for lack of a better term. Trump interrupts the meeting and says, "Does anybody want a malt?" That's how he refers to milkshakes. Insists the waiter at his golf club be brought in. We have the best malts, he said to the people around him. The waiter comes in, and of course, it was an immediate and early red flag to the intelligence community, to the national security officials, that this presidency may not go so well. And of course, it's gone very, very poorly since then. When Trump said he'd hire the best people, I guess he wasn't talking about national security staff or campaign staff. I guess he meant the people that will bring him a milkshake at a moment's notice. And this puts satire out of business. How do you make a parody of this on Saturday Night Live? How do you create a headline for The Onion? Because the real headline is The Onion headline. It's no different. It's all the same at this point in time. And I think that it should worry us. It's amusing, but it should worry us that when this story breaks, no one doubts that it's something Trump would do. Sure, you'll have the regular defenders of Trump say, oh, sources, can we really trust it? It's just too obvious that, of course, Donald Trump would do something like this. And think about it from the other side, by the way. Imagine being an intelligence official. You're in the middle of briefing Trump about some, super high level covert operation. And Trump interrupts and asks you if you want a malt during a briefing. And actually, is anybody surprised that Trump asked anybody else if they wanted a milkshake? Trump is so self-centered that piece is actually notable, although I'm sure you paid for that milkshake if any of those national security officials ended up accepting one through your tax dollars. So I guess what we can say here is, yeah, we have the opportunity to remove him in very, very soon, a couple of weeks. Can we be glad it wasn't Obama who did it? Because if Barack Obama had ordered a milkshake during such a meeting, it would have been a 24/7 national security scandal. Sean Hannity would have been talking about it. Rush Limbaugh would have been talking about it. Fortunately, it was only Trump. And by the way, the really important takeaway on briefings is it has been weeks since Donald Trump received an intelligence briefing. He's held, must be like 12 rallies in the last 2 weeks. He took a few days off, but he had up to 2 and even 3 rallies on some days. It's probably been a dozen rallies over the last 2 weeks. And Trump has not actually received a security briefing, an intelligence briefing for several weeks. That's the living nightmare, which we absolutely have to end. This is very, very fun to watch. Over the last few weeks, former Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg has been appearing on Fox News pretty often, and he's been laying out some smackdowns that are truly a delight to watch. It's just a pleasure to watch. It's a clinic on how to deal with Fox News. So Mayor Pete has been doing appearances as a surrogate of and advisor to Joe Biden. And Mayor Pete has this, it's almost like a natural ability to casually deliver hilarious and brutal attack lines that you just have to see. This first one might be my favorite. Mayor Pete is interviewed by Fox News anchors Martha McCallum and Brett Baer. This was on the eve of the vice presidential debate. The question was, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have, or at least during the campaign, had different views on healthcare, and they wanted to put Mayor Pete in a position to have to explain or defend. Kamala has this view, Joe Biden has this view. How do you square it? What's the right view? And Mayor Pete brilliantly points out that if you look at Trump and Pence, there's also a contrast from the primary, from, between their views, which is that Pence is an evangelical Christian and Trump is a president caught with a porn star. And the looks on the faces of the Fox News anchors are just priceless.
Back to my original question about the things that, when you run for president, you have a record on all of these issues. And then we've seen that record and her stance on them changing over time. So there's no doubt she's going to be asked about that tonight. Can you give us some insight into what she might say to justify why she was for Medicare for all then and is not for it now, for example?
Well, there's a classic parlor game of trying to find a little bit of daylight between running mates. And if people want to play that game, we could look into why an evangelical Christian like Mike Pence wants to be on a ticket with a president caught with a porn star, or how he feels about the immigration policy that he called unconstitutional before he decided to team up with Donald Trump. If folks want to play that game, we could do it all night. But I think what most Americans want to hear about is, are our families going to be better protected than they have been by this president who's failed to secure America in the face of one of the most dangerous things ever to happen to our country.
You actually get the feeling that this is fun for Pete Buttigieg. It's a game, which I have to tell you, I love. I've been on Fox News a couple of times, and I also see it as a joke and a game for myself. I don't see it as serious journalism. I see it more as, what can I do to make this interesting? Pete Buttigieg, much better than me at making it really interesting. And there's more of these. Here's one where Chris Wallace tried to get Pete Buttigieg again on this primary stuff, saying, do you stand by your criticisms of Joe Biden when you were running against him? And Mayor Pete just handles it perfectly.
Well, what I know is we definitely need to turn the page even more now than when I was running for president a year ago. And what we need to turn the page from is a president who is incapable of handling a public health crisis that has now cost almost 250,000 American lives, thrown our economy into a total wreckage, and has clearly no plan to do anything about it. So, yeah, let's turn the page. And we have a very clear choice between two very different futures for this country, and any differences that we have. Remember when everybody was hand-wringing, saying, how can the Democrats possibly unify? Look how unified we are now. You've got Democrats from across the spectrum, from the left to the center, joining with independents and Republicans, because we can all see what's at stake here. I mean, I can't think of an election in modern history where the choice has been this stark, and I know what side I'm on.
What's brilliant about this, and perfectly done, is that Mayor Pete goes directly at the top issues for voters, economy and COVID, and turns the question completely around and wraps it up with a bow. And especially if the audience was a Fox News, typical Fox News audience, and they were hoping to see Pete, up against the ropes, for Pete to know that Trump is failing in approval on economy and coronavirus, and to turn it around and to go right at those topics is absolutely perfect. Here is Mayor Pete calling Trump out for not respecting his own followers by stuffing them into rooms during a pandemic.
Look, we've seen the Vice President Biden, campaigning across the country. There's one key difference, which is he's never going to stuff his supporters into a room without masks in an indoor space over the objections of local public health officials. When you do that, you show a level of fundamental disrespect for your own supporters.
So Martha McCallum started to push back, and Mayor Pete didn't back down. Let's take a look.
The point is that there's respect for the health and safety of the people attending the event. You set a certain tone when you lead people to a certain place. And if you lead people to danger, you bear some responsibility for that. In Tulsa and more recently Nevada, he led people into danger. And you know how he can tell? You can tell what a dim view he has of the intelligence of his own supporters. Was something they were made to do, was sign a waiver saying they wouldn't sue him if they got sick and died. Think about what that says for the respect that he has.
Very, very well done. And then lastly, here is Mayor Pete. This is now the day after the VP debate. He was interviewed by Fox and Friends, specifically Steve Doocy, and he is going right at Donald Trump's comments about troops being suckers. And remember, Mayor Pete is a veteran, and Steve Doocy tries to interrupt twice. Mayor Pete just doesn't allow it.
I also appreciated that she stood up for American troops. The President of the United States calling those who served suckers and losers, saying he didn't understand what's in it for them while he was standing on the hallowed ground of Section 60.
Right, but Mayor Pete, the President
I think anyone who
has said,
served knows what Section 60 means.
Sure,
indeed. The way he talked about the folks like John McCain.
I hated to interrupt you, but the president has denied that particular story.
Right, but we know he's lying because, even in the middle of his denial,
how do we know he's lying?
He said, I never called well, because part of his denial was he said, I never called John McCain a loser, and anybody with Twitter can go and see where he did. So to believe that he was lying in that part of his sentence, but not another part. I remember this is a guy who, back when he was a wealthy young man in New York, born to privilege, thought to himself, I'm going to let some sucker go to Vietnam in my place, and pretended to be disabled. I mean, if you really believe the president now on this kind of stuff, I got a bridge to sell you.
All right.
Really, really good stuff. I mean, really just a clinic on how to deal with Fox News. And in each of those clips, you see something different. But what's common to all of them is you see the anchors' faces, Steve Doocy, Martha McCallum. They don't know how to handle this because Mayor Pete is brutally handling them and doing it so quickly. Just really, really well done. I hope we see much, much more of this, particularly in the lead up to and even after this Thursday night's presidential debate, for which I hope you will join me. I will be live starting half an hour before the debate, maybe even 45 minutes, on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. Don't miss it. Also, don't miss today's bonus show. We will talk about the Jeffrey Toobin fiasco. We will talk about Slovakia testing the entire country for coronavirus. And we will also talk about the New Zealand election results. Very interesting election results out of New Zealand, a country that has handled the virus very, very well. So get instant access to the bonus show one of two ways. Become a member at joinpakman.com or become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Thanks so much for watching today's full episode of the show. Just a reminder, today's sponsor is Blinkist, the app that lets you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try Blinkist for free and save 25% off of a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've also included the link right underneath this video.